Okay, so you might notice that as a co-host, I'll try and change things up. I think we're kind of experimenting as we go. We have your 5 topics. I'm going to run through the topics right now, and I think just like any good curriculum developers, right? We want to try and figure out what that cadence of video creation is based off of and with the tools that we have. So, so for people tuning in, we're going to be looking at the Harvard 5-foot shelf, John Taylor Gatto, which I'm fascinated to delve into, lost learning via COVID breakdowns, advericundium gone crazy. I'm not pronouncing that right.
Advericundium, the fallacy of authority.
Ah, okay, perfect.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that sounds good for me because I can't pronounce it. So that sounds that I'm pretty much not the authority.
Yeah, my Latin is terrible. I just know that stuff. And it makes me sound smart, which is really all I'm going for.
Well, you know what? Sometimes I disagree with an academic or somebody in a community that might say something like, make it more understandable, which is fine. But when you tell students to kind of reach up, there can be a consilience of sorts to try out some of the Latin words, right?
Yes.
Try and incorporate them, understand what their references are, pull that lineage. And I encourage that in our media group for sure.
Sure.
And then the last one was the you first policy. So,
yes.
Where's your intuition go out of those? Where would you like to start?
I think Taylor Gatto is probably the most logical and best place to start. I think I had it on there. John Taylor Gatto is he died a couple of years ago. I want to say in 2017. And I put him there because I don't use the word hero very often, but he's one of my heroes. And he was a public school teacher in New York City in the bad old days, before the union, before there was any kind of coherence to the profession in the city. They opened up a bunch of public schools, and the Board of Ed was a political patronage thing, and it was kind of a mess. And he comes in as a teacher in the late 60s, I think, almost very much by mistake. And he realized some things very quickly. That one of them was that his schooling in Monongahela, Pennsylvania, was very different than what he were getting in New York City public school, in the sense that the New York City public school children were getting nothing. They were just getting fluff. And it was kind of like a gigantic babysitting service. And so he starts to,
which one was that? That was the New York students?
The New York students weren't getting great stuff where he was. He was in the bad neighborhood school.
Oh, I see. Okay.
All right. So, and it's all, and I don't want to use too overarching terms, because there were large parts of the system then that had extremely rigorous curriculum and really, really pushed. But he was in a nondescript middle school in Harlem, and he was like, these students are really smart, and they have all the tools that everyone else has, but they've been labeled, and they've been kind of shoved into the corner of the system. And he's like, this is ridiculous. Not only is the curriculum lightweight, but we're doing a disservice to these students. And I'm going to shorten it a little bit here, because that's not his main angle. What happened was he started looking into what school was, like when it was made, when it was created, when it was formed. And he wrote a book, took him, I think, about 10 years, called The Underground History of American Education. And what he uncovered wasn't really very nice. And it really changed my life. I saw his work mentioned in a graphic novel of all places. And it was a really interesting graphic novel called Nightly News, and it was doing one of my favorite pastimes, which is bashing the media, right? I love it. I'm there. I see bash the media. I'm there. You can write it in blood. I'm going to be first in line.
Yeah.
And it was called Nightly News, and it was written by a talented young writer. And it was kind of like a graphic novel with a concept. And on one page, it was talking about kind of like the dumbing down of America via the media. And he had a graph that he had taken from one of John Taylor Gatto's essays on the dosage of Ritalin in mostly but not exclusively bad areas to mostly but not exclusively boys, and the amount of it into those children and the Novartis stock price.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, whoa, hold on a minute. What? Who is this guy? And I found out he was an 8th grade English teacher, language arts teacher in the public schools, and that he had written this book. And he was New York City Teacher of the Year 3 times, New York State Teacher of the Year twice. Ironically, he was kind of against school because he had found out where the origins of American schooling. I don't know about other countries, but American schooling, and I'll give you the very short version. It was stolen from Austria, and it was a factory model, and it was really kind of created to keep everyone in their class, so to speak. You can't have a wayward, like the Tocqueville stuff from the mid-1800s, and he's walking around America, and people are extremely literate, and they have an inner grit, and they're all entrepreneurial, and you could never find any employees because everyone wants to work for themselves. And he said, you can't have that. You can't have Carnegies. You can't have Edisons. You can't have Madam C.J. Walkers. You have to have everybody regimented in this Austrian-style schooling where it's kind of like creating sectors and managing and planning the intellectual growth of humanity. I just did a terrible summarization there.
No, that is really good. Honestly, you did that to me last time, and you're actually very good at explaining that, because I was following you, I was following your thought process the whole time. So embrace that.
Okay, good.
If you have a student that fumbles like that, you may feel like it's fumbling. It's not. It's like,
because I know what's here, and I know how I feel about it, and then when I'm talking about it, it's not quite the same, and it doesn't help that I have the gray background, but this is the monster beast, right? The underground history of American education. It's kind of weird. There you go. Right. This is his like self-published book.
Do me a favor, Doug. We don't need to do that because it just blurs out. Just say what the name of the book is, and then I'll put a nice crisp image.
Yeah, The Underground History of American Education. I've read it a few times. It's quite incredible. Mm-hmm. And it sounds nefarious and conspiratorial, but these people didn't wake up in the morning in the olden days and say, you know what? How can I destroy lives? How can I be the puppet master of humanity and put the boot on everyone's throat? They weren't doing that, but they were doing a very, like, we're here at the top. We know what's best. We need one class of people to do menial tasks in factories and whatnot. And we need a very, much higher class, but, much smaller, to be the poets and the engineers and the gifted artists and whatnot. So it's kind of a twisted, demented story with many moving parts, and it took him a long time to write. And he was just a regular guy. He's just a regular dude. Taught English at IS 44, and also then later up at a school near where I grew up, Booker T. Washington Middle School. So it's after reading his material, I never taught the same way again. I never showed up to the job the same way again, ever. So it's. So
would you say that would be more like challenging the students to really, really take charge of their own education, to really put their own learning at the forefront of every activity that they do?
Yes.
This kind of thing?
Yes. And what he would do, he would get visitors to his 8th grade English class. In the city, they call it language arts or communication arts. They put fancy names. It's English, basically. And people would come and visit as he got more well-known. And it was kind of an embarrassment to administration because there'd be, 27 children on the roster, and there'd be 7 of them there because they were all, with the permission of their parents, going out and doing things. They were going to a local truck trucking company in New Jersey to learn what that business is like and communicate with the adults there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or there was one woman, a young 8th grader who loved to swim and she couldn't find a pool. So he sent her out for like a month, and she created a database on paper pretty much of all the pools in New York City. And like the New Yorker or some big magazine tried to buy it from her. And he recommended that she not sell it. He's like, you did it. They're going to put their name on it. It's your work. Keep it. And stuff like that. There's just stories. He has another book called Weapons of Mass Instruction. And it's very independent. It's people taking independent roles and forthright roles in their own intellectual growth.
So what's your reaction? What if you had to kind of sum it up in one sentence as like your frustration, or I would like to have it solved, or I would like it so, what would your response be?
That's a huge question, but I'll try to, I'll in one sentence, stop the drugs, the legal drugs, and stop the labeling.
Labeling, okay.
Yeah, I have quote unquote special education students.
Uh-huh.
They're now labeled special education.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes that label causes damage. Sometimes that, like, everybody knows who's in the reading class. And, I had a student the other day said, he's like, it's really not that hard here. He said, I know I'm not the smartest person. And I felt that way in 8th grade, but here it's much better. I just do the work and my grades come in really nicely. And he's a gentle soul. I have to contact the house. They've really raised a well-balanced young man. And you know what? He's not the smartest tool in the shed, or the sharpest tool in the shed. His writing needs a lot of work, but the other things clicked, the other neurons fired, and the gears spun, and he realized what he had to do. And that kind of self-introspection, you as a philosopher, academic type, this guy knows, know thyself. He's 14, and he knows and is unafraid to admit that he's not the brightest in the group, but he knows that if I can just put in the work, my grades will come in, and it's so far so good. Mm-hmm. And he admitted this, and I almost felt bad. I almost started to cry, like, because he is somewhat of a simpler mind, but he knows. So
true. Yeah. And it gets into these, like I was going to say like a Forrest Gump movie, but, Voltaire and Candide, that's a perfect example of the simpleton that seems to, just go at the right cadence. And, the wisdom that emerges from those, those books for me is that we tend to we tend towards hyper novelty. And so we know this about ourselves. And the individualistic, the quintessential individualistic culture, which is the United States, and it's not a pejorative at all. It's just, we just know that that's the way it is.
Sure. Yeah.
You'll see more bubbles, and now, say financial bubbles.
Yes.
It's more of a boom bust cycle of like birth renewal, and then has strong underpinnings, and God only knows. So the idea is that you have these different kinds of ideologies competing, and I think that like you said, we want to have a society where the Carnegies emerge, right? Now I can't remember who else you used as an example, but he was
Edison.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, his mother would be put in prison. He was 12 years old on that railroad by himself.
Yeah.
And he got an old printing press and came up with the Grand Trunk Herald, because he could get news faster on the train, and he printed up copies and sold them. Yeah. He's 12. That's a 6th grader. She'd be in jail.
Let's talk about that worship for a minute. Like I have so many questions. This can go in so many different ways, but you have somebody who like this sounds like a romanticized story about the entrepreneur, and I've been that entrepreneur since I was 14. But you used to sell garbage bags to your neighborhood or whatever, to do like garbage collection or something like this, like, or lemonade stands or whatever. Like, you were just constantly trying to come up with things, and that for a large extent was how I think. And it's helped me immensely, but I can't expect that everybody in our population would be like that.
Right.
And so I'm one of the doers, right? And coming from one of the doers, I would say I would like to see like a universal base payment for people, so that the artist can do the artist thing, and the people but dangerously close to, we don't want to give people a free ride. Right. And that's I don't know how to separate that. I don't know how to put incentive in there. But I do think that the incentive trajectory is inherently wrong, like you point out, in the education system, where it's gearing towards job and job placement. I thought, is there a way to change that, or how organic is that? Like, it's reform, the most meaningful reform. I like reform. I don't like revolution. I like to be able to reform it from within and acknowledge where things are good, and then build and fix and stuff like that. Let's start with power first. How much of it is a power structure that people hold on to? It's getting kind of antiquated now, right? We're a few generations, which means kin selection starts to come in and bias friends and family, sort of thing. Right.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you're Daniel talking about kind of like very big macro picture of the structure of the states in general, or are you talking about school systems or just all big systems?
I went from the big system down to specifically about the school, and what like, if we had to deconstruct the school system, where are the symptoms of the perversion, right? If it is, we could say, hey, just quite apparently, we really think there's some, corruption at the top, which would make sense.
That's putting it mildly. Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's the country's biggest jobs program. I don't mean to interrupt, but like a lot of it is that it's become a huge source of payout. I mean, it's bigger than the military. The American public school system is, I think, the biggest public entity. I mean, it's a leviathan. It's completely locally reformable, yes, because there's still local school boards and things like that. So there is reform in certain spots. But what people are doing isn't necessarily, in some places they're trying to reform from within, and with some success in certain spots, but they're just not playing the game. And the homeschooling movement has exploded in popularity, and they're just doing education outside of the system. So they're not really building their own system necessarily. They're just saying, you know what, we are going to homeschool. And with the internet and technology now, it's so different than it used to be. Yeah. There's so much dynamism in the system, and so many fantastic programs, and people will create like pods of students, and they'll share resources, and it's very fluid and organic, and they aren't reforming anything. They're simply stepping out of the building per se and doing their own thing. And that's becoming, I mean, there are black families in the bad neighborhood and white liberals in San Francisco figuring out the same thing. They're both disgruntled with the system, and they've checked out. Very, because people are like, oh my God, that's just Bible Belt, Bible thumping Midwestern weirdos in Kansas. No, that was maybe 1982, maybe, but even that's a caricature. Now you have, you've got, I know black families, their children just don't go to local public school. They're just, no, I'm not doing it. And they don't have much money, but there's so many low price resources that anyone could do it. And honestly, this is the Harvard 5-foot shelf. You go to the library and get those books for free. You don't need to spend any money. You can get all of them for nothing.
Yeah.
and get an education. Education doesn't have to cost that much money.
Okay, Douglas, I have a serious question for you here now.
Okay.
So when I started looking at John Taylor Gatto,
Yes.
and I saw what he was doing, I said, you know what? We got to spice it up a notch. We got to write a book.
Who's
Live, me and you. We got to write a book.
Oh, okay.
Now it's just an idea, but what I'm looking at is that we're doing these episodes, and I'm looking at John Taylor Gatto. I had no clue, and you were was it a caricature away, or wherever you found this reference, this odd cultural reference, right?
Yeah,
a graphic novel.
Yeah, comic book. Yeah.
If this is screaming something that a media outlet should grab and start to popularize through our discussions, and I think that the best way to do that is to structure it in a way where let's write a book about it. I do one episode right now with 2 engineers, and we're creating science fiction live, because we meet once a week and we do something similar.
Right.
But we're like, okay, how are we going to start it? Let's, and if our research is to go through his books, then let's go through his books.
Okay.
Let me be that sounding board of a layman who is really fascinated and really green when it comes to, the intricacies of the educational world. I think I told you last week about Carmen Medina, who's going to be coming on in the coming week. So she's like a retired CIA agent, and
sounds fascinating.
It is, because it's like real world philosophy.
Yes.
And so the thing, I can speculate all I want. I can put however many thought experiments up, but until you've actually, we have the complex system right here. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that the best tool that we have is an ability to communicate.
Yes.
It just, some people, we seem to forget that. And so I think if we can, tune into some of these problem areas and then expose them as we notice them, explode them up a little bit. They seem to keep coming up.
I think so too. And then you have I'm there in the school, and your Carmen Medina was her name. CIA experience. I mean, this is like earthy experience, people boots on the ground. And then, I think, like you had mentioned yourself, as a sounding board, as a communicator, then it's almost like you match, or the things that are matched, the philosophical connections are made as to why things wind up getting done. Like things get done at the schoolroom or the classroom, or Carmen Medina's world. Like they had their philosophies, and some of them dovetail, I think, with some of the ancient stuff that quite well. And I just think those kind of earthy, granular experiences matched up with and bounced off of kind of an academic sounding board. It just makes for interesting conversation. It's the behavior of people. It's behavior of groups. That's why the school thing is so interesting and weird and strange and despairing and deep, because it's people, right? So there's this one young man in my second period English class who has more internal knowledge than some of the doofuses, time-serving hacks above me in the system. He knows what he is already. So he's got that without knowing how to word it. He's got that already. He doesn't necessarily need me to explain to him that, above the oracle at Delphi, it said, know thyself. And that was code to the people who knew themselves. Don't believe this drugged up 15-year-old girl, right? Like all this kind of stuff. And he's already there. But
I love that. We could say something like, it's all in the news about, with COVID and stuff, about natural immunity. And he seems to have something that's sounds very similar, but it's not. He has this natural affinity to, or, he's just naturally humble.
Yes.
So he has this natural, it's just, and hey, look, I think it is very natural. And you could say the same sort of thing. You could see like a young girl or a young boy who's very beautiful, right?
Yeah.
They're just very beautiful. And we can notice that. Like we notice these qualities. And I think this does take us back to Greece, and it does take us to, some of the virtues.
Yeah.
And I think they don't have to shape our entire world, but this is my biggest bone to pick with Jordan Peterson, is that he's too, I should say, he's not too. It's really weird when I say that about somebody, because it's really just my personal opinion, right? Like it's really just my personal opinion about a stance. But I think
what were you going to say? That he's too what?
It's more, he's too much of a Christian apologetic for me, right?
Really?
And yeah. He's too. I could say preachy, but he's being. I think he could spend more time in the ancient Greek tradition, which would have more fundamental understanding across cultures. And hey, look, we had who was it, Vox Day on the show,
yes.
right? And he's a proud nationalist, and actually, that's something I'm trying to understand as a really valid option to a universal government. We were talking about last time, right?
Right.
And so if you have the entire liberal community moving towards this new world order of a universal government, there's I think a real strong fundamental emergence of nationalist interest, because it's practical. And it's lunacy to think we can have a world, everybody get along society, right? Like we're not, like a whole of human civilization has not been like that.
Right.
There's only like, what is it that is unique about this small sliver of prosperity, right? That we think that we're all just going to get along.
Right.
Right.
And I think, and I hope I didn't interrupt you by coming in here, Daniel, but the idea of, when you go back to the early days of school, this is John Taylor Gatto's one of his finer moments, is in the late 1800s and early 1900s, they were already thinking, and they wrote this stuff down. You can read a lot of badly written treatises and horrible essays that are just boring as hell. But what they wrote down was very clear. They wanted to make sure that that they could kind of mold the young people coming out, and they could create a couple of things. One of them is, this kind of class structure where very Calvinistic in a lot of ways, like know your place. You stay in your lane, so to speak, to use a proper or a modern term. And that could kind of be managed. And, sales resistance is one of these things that, like if you can get rid of sales resistance and you can teach them the idea that you have this kind of monolithic, not quite yet world government, right? You have to do sales. Sales resistance is hard, but what if you could get rid of it? What if you could spend 12 years getting rid of that fierce, just maniacal very American idea that you brought up earlier in the conversation. This fiercely original, fiercely independent, most of the time entrepreneurial spirit, right? If you can get rid of that, if you can pound it out of somebody, then that resistance is gone, and that person is much more easily controllable. And then you can sell all kinds of ideas to them: world government, globalism, whatever, NAFTA, right? You can do whatever you damn please. And they saw school, organized, taxpayer-funded public school, as a way to do that. Because, you can't have a short 5'2" Scottish kid with a boxy head who was a cleaning serf for some dude in Pittsburgh. And the guy didn't really pay him much. He said, just go to my library and read what you want. Oh, okay. And that's Andrew Carnegie. I mean, you can't have that. Right? The power at the top, you cannot have that you just can't do it. That person is way too much of a threat. And that they talk like this when and Gatto did all the heavy lifting. when they're talking about what to do and how to make these schools. And there were pockets of resistance that were like they had to put guns to people's faces and say, no, they're like, no, you're not taking my kids away. I don't know who you're giving them to. It was a crazy idea, and it took some time to implement, but they did it.
This reminds me of in a very historical and abstract way. This reminds me of the time of Alexander. So Alexander goes and conquers, right? And he's a king like no one's ever seen before. Like, this is just incredible. Like, it's, he's still to this day, I think if you're going to give, the king, like, Alexander the Great, if you're going to give the great, not Frederick here, right? You're going to give it to one, like Alexander, I think was it, right? It was incredible.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And so I think what happens is that, now this would move me more into a justification for a Marxist position here. Okay. But what you're going to see is that the power structures that emerge after that orderly sort of thing, like all his generals like fan out, right? And they're like, I've got this, the Ptolemaic Empire and this just became this like instant power grab, right? Because with the vacuum of Alexander, right? And so undoubtedly what happens is that with some pretty amazing teachers in the school board system or early thinkers, there could have been a lot of good intentions, but it's maybe not changing fast enough to keep up with basically where we're at. And I don't know if a full-blown revolution, like flipping the whole system around, will ever make sense, or will, kind of just fixing it, because you told me last time, you said that there was too many of the administrators are stuck on data analytics, right?
Yes.
And data analytics does nothing really from a Platonic, like, here's our projected trajectory of good, here's what we're going to do. Can you see yourself doing that? Right. That has this is, my issue with it. Right. But when you base a lot of your predictions on something that doesn't take into account the human, capacity for imagination, you've, really limited your system. And I think that we just need more people to advocate in that overall thesis of what it is. And I think, we're maybe at a perfect point in time to really, solidify that thesis on, John Taylor Gatto. And I think maybe we could use the episodes to go through his work and then, kind of base our stuff around that. And then,
I like that. There was he just finished up, I think, 10 or 12 years of podcasting guy, Brett Venat. And he has a podcast called he had a project and a podcast called The School Sucks Project. And he had been a tutor and a school teacher, and he got into Gatto's work, and he broke off on his own. He did some tutoring to make money, but he started a podcast at the perfect time, very early, and started other educational projects all outside of the system. And so he has his take and his kind of, his career he began to model after Gatto as well. It's a great idea that you have, because it is it's kind of like our look at that same kind of thing. And what I like about the Gatto material is it's the opposite of what you just talked about in terms of like data crunching. It's everything that isn't. It's, your 7-year-old nephew, your 15-year-old son, your 8-year-old niece, your 18-year-old daughter. Like, these are amazing, fantastic, adaptable, smart, capable, wonderful creatures. Let them go and let them go and figure things out. And that learning curve and that electric openness of figuring out things in the world is incredible. And you take that and you juxtapose it with sit in a box, and every 45 minutes a bell goes off. And if you're in the middle of a poem, oh well, time to go to phys ed. right? Or if you're finally figuring out how to balance an equation, not too damn bad. Time to go to lunch, right? And it's very, very rote, very cold, methodical. And the old way in the States, like school and education, isn't mentioned anywhere in the Constitution. It's just not there.
Yeah.
Hell, they mention an armed militia. They don't mention school, right? Keep and bear arms is in it. Gold and silver for tax payments is in it. School isn't in it because it just wasn't. You didn't need it. People went out and did amazing things, and you look at how people wrote. I could show you a middle school civics test from Kansas City. I don't know, maybe 1893. 1897, something like that. And it really shows you where people were because they had started school. Right now, they've got some taxpayer funded school. And the rigor on the exams and the reading is incredible. It's 8th grade. I'd probably curl up in the fetal position right down here and soil my shorts if you gave me that test. Right? I'd be a mess. Right? My ego would be blown forever, man. You'd never see me again. And it's like a snapshot of where people were and what they knew. It's quite incredible. Your Gatto idea is a good one. I like it.
Have you thought about writing a book in your adulthood?
Yes, not on, and it's only in the last 18 months. And I'm like my bass guitar non-playing. I have my non-starting. The title is "The Unintended Side Effects of COVID-19 on Schooling." Because in March of 2020, when we all went home, and I can only use where I work as a lens and kind of the peripheral things I wrote about on the blog, things now are very different. And most of them for the worse. So, and there, some of them I think are intentional side effects, but I think some of them are unintentional side effects because I'm in the X Factor 5th dimension matrix of kind of like bad neighborhood oddness. So our reactions to these things and what's happened to some of our students, I think they are unintentional side effects and many of them are bad. And so I have some students who wrote, like my seniors, the first part, my seniors wrote material on Taylor Gatto because I have a public speaking course I do. I'm an adjunct professor at Syracuse University and I run a public speaking presentational speaking class for college credit. So I get some of the best students in our building. And when they had to go home, I showed them, I did a unit on John Taylor Gatto's presentations on school. And because we had done September through March, that class had inculcated its own sense of independence and its own sense of self-direction and doing presentations in front of a group. You know, people would rather swim with sharks than stand in front of a group and talk, right? They're deathly afraid of it. And so they got over it and they became very independent. So the weird part is at the beginning of this, when we were first home, they're like, man, I'm learning more now on my own because I have time than I did in the last 2 years in the building. Because the spark of learning was still there. And I'll take some of the credit, but a lot of it is these are just young 18-year-old, mostly women, who were just eager to learn. And so now they're not shackled by the schedule. So they're like, I get my work done in 2.5 hours, and I have the rest of the day to explore stuff. Flip that to now, where we do most of our work digitally, even though we're back in the building. And it's kind of become do the work and get a grade. And it's so hard for me I'm about ready to bring back notebooks and paper and pens and do everything like I did in 1998. Because in the laptop, they type the work, send. Okay, it's done. Grade. And there's nothing to talk about. There's no written dialogue between us, like where I would make a correction or write a note. Nothing. It's very cold.
Wow, I'm really excited on a couple different levels here. First off, I think that the book itself, I'd like to suggest that we do a rotating, because I can help you with this book too.
Okay.
So we could do a rotating 1 week, focus on. So the idea, like, I mean, you know that COVID is a huge thing right now, right?
Yes.
So what I would do is probably work with you to a point where we could do something like pre-sales or something like that, right? We can get that set up.
Mm-hmm.
But then we want to give it to a bigger publisher because it's more about distribution.
Mm.
I mean, because it's your, I think, and if we can go to a larger publisher and say, here's some of our marketing that we've done, here's, a certain number of pre-orders. What books now are, publishers are more of a business transaction. So you got to make your case, right? Like, I'm like your attorney, and I'm saying, look, man, if you want to do this, like, bring them the marketing, say it's already done. Here's who follows us. Here's who I'm working with. Here's how many books that are already pre-sold, right? To get on your big distribution type of thing. And I think that's what's starting to shape here.
We should do something like that. I'm not sure that this is the vehicle. Just because my initial reaction is, I don't need the big publisher, and I don't mean that in an arrogant way, because they serve a purpose and they do their thing. I want to just put it down and write it. I'm not going to make a sales pitch. If publisher rep X hates it, they can go F themselves. And if they don't like the way I talk, they can come see me and say it to my face. Because this is how we do it in the Bronx.
Yeah, I know, but you're the perfect one, because I'm going to be like, well, all right, I'm going to be this Doug. I want to be Doug's agent, because I love this guy, right? You may not care about the money, but I care about the money. So I do. Big deal, because you say, well, okay, that's fine. We're in every major bookstore, and people are buying it, and the system's changing. I mean, fuck, I guess that's okay.
When you talk like that, you bring me closer to your side, right? You're good. See, you're a good salesman. You do that. I can see that. I like that. It's just my initial reaction isn't that, like I told you, I started my YouTube channel. I did not for views or anything like that. And this is the same kind of thing. It's to put it down on paper. And put it down and self-publish. And if it sells no copies, I don't really, doesn't bother me at all.
Here's one thing. So I can publish them on Google Books and Apple Books for you for no charge, right? Mm-hmm. And they're there. Right. And then what I've been doing as of late, and this is what I was doing with my personal, the personal copy program from Barnes and Noble. Mm-hmm. Is that I'm doing this with my son right now, where we're doing a translation of the Iliad. We're getting that published. Mm-hmm. It takes a few months, but it'll come back, and then we'll go through that, make a second copy. But anyway, so it's like the one-off piece. Mm-hmm. That's something that, can be done, because you could say, all right, I mean, if I'm only giving a few to a friend, I can order a couple dozen, hand them out when I want. They're available digitally. Doesn't matter, right? I mean, Yuval Noah Harari's book was published and released at, with somebody that, really was inconsequential, right? And so you might say, that's all I want to do, right? Right. You may find that if what you represent on the internet turns into something equivalent to Jordan Peterson, right? then maybe you might say, well, then let's turn that volume on again, or whatever. But you're still in command of it. Is basically what I would say. That would be a good strategy. Yeah.
We have to talk about this, iron some things out. But I like the way you talk when it comes to that, and look at what we're doing, right? Yeah. We haven't known each other very long, and we're already trying to figure out on our own. I didn't take a class in any of this stuff. Yeah. Right. Maybe you did. I don't know. Maybe you just learned marketing and digital stuff and media material on your own. I mean, did you go to school for it? Did you get a doctorate in it? No. Right. But we're this is kind of like kind of corny English teacher stuff here, bringing it back to the book. But this is Gatto's point. Like, regular folk will be, I was average student at University of Iowa, for Christ's sake, nothing special, no amazing GPA,
Yeah.
My glory days were in, after ninth grade. For me, it's all downhill, right? I was a star runner and good grades, and since then it's just been a downward trajectory since I was 15.
Yeah.
So, and here we are figuring these things out, and this is kind of what he was talking about. Like, we have to communicate, which means we have to use language skills, your sales, like. I mean, these kinds of different, we have to keep the plate spinning all at once. We can't be lazy. If we're going to meet every week, I got to get off my tail end and, write some things down. And, I can't just, whatever.
Yeah.
That's discipline. You don't need to tell me to show up to first period at 7:50.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, wait, Sanderson is going to be all over me like white on rice. I better get this going. You know what I mean? Like, it's all of these lessons built in. It's just baked into the cake of what we do as people. And Gatto's thing was a lot of school crushes that. It stifles that. And unfortunately, a lot of the people in it are there. It's a good job. They're not necessarily bad people, but some of them are dumb as a bag of hammers. Some of them are really bright and they can't teach. You get, and you don't get to vet them. You send your kid to school. Who you getting?
Yeah.
Well,
ultimately, I'll tell you in a very straight, direct line that's, you said you love to bash media companies, and that's what I intended to do, was start out and make a media company that, was unbashable. And,
I love it.
It's working with people, and it doesn't matter. Like, we're trying to figure out, how do we get this out there? How do we, right? And each one of them is a problem. So I wanted to tell you about, because I wrote down here, ask about students. One of the programs that we're doing at planksip is we're putting together a presentation for student unions. And we really want to get students probably in the 20 to 28 kind of range, writing for planksip and, going through this program that we have. So where was I going to take this? I think that would be something you might be interested in as well. I don't know how or to what capacity, but it's, I think it's really going to be fundamental to, the growth of our organization, really. We've tried with several different groups, and we've written, some collaborative projects with everybody from like easy breezy fiction kind of romance thing, right? Which to children's novels, right? So I had, when I first went out, I had this whole big sort of like all different types of people. And that was great, but I was like, but I want more philosophy. I want more like, this sort of stuff, right? And so then we're like, okay, we want to really focus on those minds. And so one of the programs that we started is a writers cooperative. And so what they do is they buy into the writers cooperative, and instead of us having a panel of basically people that, judge your work, your essays and stuff, it goes into a peer review competition, and then the peers decide whose paper is the best. Right. So we have this scale from $500 all the way to $800 or $8,000 for articles, right? And this payout schedule for all of these peer review competitions. And so what I really like about that model is that it's a market in a way that the best ideas still rise to the top, but it's in the co-op, so that the dispersal of all of those funds actually go to the writers. You know what I'm saying? So it's a really unique, a unique program within planksip. And the competitions that we have, there's I think 692 individual writing assignments. So there's a big pool of potential writing assignments, right? And these writing assignments, they have to do with famous intellectuals of our past, right? So it could be, a quote from Edgar Allan Poe or something like that, right? And so they have to, they have to write about a topic. They have to write about what they see in a meme and what they see in a title. Here are some of the ideas. Where do you want to take this sort of thing? And so it's a real exercise on, I I refer to as FFA, free for all, but it's like a free form association exercise.
Right.
Right. So the prompt is that if you're prompted to write 500 words in response to this sort of this question and quote and stuff, this inspiration, if you write a 4-line haiku, that's risky. No one's saying you can't do that, but it's risky amongst the 12 people in the group.
Yeah.
You're like, will I win this? Are they going to see that this kicks ass?
Right.
And it better. So the thing is that risk is apparent. But you could say, I think it's attainable risk from a platonic sense, because you're like, there's only 11 other people. I just have to convince 11 other people this is a good idea here.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and
it's an interesting risk. Yeah.
It's an interesting risk worth kind of striving for in a small thing.
Right.
And because there's so many competitions, you're like, I didn't win this one. I didn't win that one. I didn't win this one. But there's always more coming.
Right.
And, you know, if you do the work, just like a gym membership, if you do the work, you submit them and you keep submitting them, then you'll, you know, you'll get better, not only from the fact that you came in 2nd, 3rd, or 11th or 12th,
right,
but you're involved in that sort of process. So we've put a lot of emphasis on that.
Yeah.
And the part where you were going to plug into this picture, right, from a tutoring standpoint, is that when the students join, they join either with a free membership or a paid membership. But the paid membership means they get access to you, for example, as a tutor.
Right.
So of course we want to match you with the right sort of, you know, right sort of students. But it's a pathway. When they come into this cooperative, they may actually just want to write, and then they'll get all their assignments, but they may want to write and get a little bit more confidence with their writing, and meet with you a couple times a month or something. Right. And so we just basically take that student in our system and we tag it and we move it over. We say, okay, now you're in a tutoring phase, and you may do that for 6 months, a year and a half, or then you move into a different phase, right? And then maybe you want to, you know, submit your work and try and win the competitions, right? So
interesting,
yeah. So we try and not make it, and it's harder because you have to explain it to people. And I've opted very directly not trying to put it in a sheet and say, here's option A, B, C, and D, because invariably, just like we've, you know, been on this, our 3rd episode, we're creating things on the fly. You might have said, I'm not going to write a book right now because, you know, every time I think about it, my eyes go cross-eyed. I don't know what excuse you'd give, but if you said, no, I'm just like, no, thanks.
Right.
Then it's fine. We would talk about other ways to, you know, work together. Right.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. That's an interesting, I like that idea. And also just even some of the stuff where, you know, you have the students, they continually write, you know, like I like to practice what I preach, and I have the blog site, and, you know, I think I missed 4 or 5 days, and I'm like, you know what, if you're going to try to write, you have to write often.
Yeah.
You know, every good writer, every quality writer that I've ever read, and you know, his politics are ridiculous, but Stephen King is a good writer, and his book on writing, I believe it's called On Writing, and it's really just a memoir. And he taught high school English in some nothing school in Maine. He and his wife lived in a tiny rat hole rented house, and his typewriter back in those days was underneath the staircase, and that was his like office. And it was, you know, he has a couple of pictures of it, but he said, I wrote every day. And as I wrote, things changed. And Dan Brown says the same thing. He's, you know, the guy who wrote the Illuminati books.
Yeah.
You know, I'm blanking on the name.
No, because I
Code. He wakes up at 5 a.m. because he said, I was a high school English teacher, and 5 a.m., 4:30 a.m. was the only time in my house when it was quiet.
Yeah, Dan Brown.
So I had to wake up and write, and he said that's what I still do. So, you
know, I did buy his book because I've written a book called Will Freeman, and I'm just kind of waiting to publish it. But it's about artificial intelligence and future here. So I think he wrote one. His last book was about artificial intelligence or the end of the world or something like that. And
yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I haven't read the last few.
And so that's the last I've heard of him. But I want to run this thesis by you. No thesis. I can't call it a thesis. It's a hypothesis. A thesis. If you listen to Brett Weinstein, he says you only call it a thesis, a theory when it's like mainstay. Everybody acknowledges it. If it's a hypothesis, if it's like, here's my idea.
Right. Right. And you're hitting all the Canadian high notes. We got, no, Weinstein, I think, is American. Okay, yeah, my bad. I thought you were running down the Canadian Mount Rushmore. But anyway, yeah, continue.
Oh, I actually forgot what my point was.
With Brett Weinstein, you said you when you were talking about the writing, like we were talking about, and the Dan Brown books.
Cathartic was the thing. Thank you for helping me pull that out of the abyss. So, which, by the way, I think memory is absolutely fascinating from studying philosophy. Yeah. And I think, how that imprint dissipates is just, very fascinating. But I want to run this idea by you, and let me know how it resonates. Because I don't know how it replicates in a classroom and how it replicates in a classroom from an innovative type of thinking. But I do know, and I'll describe how I write and how I was inspired to write. There's a I think I got back into intellectual sort of books through a friend of mine. He's passed away, a few years ago. But I got back into him. He was into this new atheist movement that with Daniel Dennett and Sam Harris and all these guys, right? And I started reading, Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and these kinds of books, and that's from trying to really stay focused on more business books, right? I mean, I was always so busy as an entrepreneur, trying to just be busy, maintaining my company that Candide would be be so silly. It would be so ridiculous. Yeah. So eventually, I did sell my company in 2016, and then I started Planksip, and that's what this business was to try and focus on those kinds of things, and then try and figure out how to make it so that would be of value in a profession, in a future job of and so that's where that little competition model comes from. Now, in terms of where we go with anything from video creation to book reviews, it's all game, and I'm just excited by the possibility of ripping through that and bringing more people into the community. It's like I'm a philosopher first, then turned into a marketing guy second, right? Like
yeah, an odd combination, but yeah.
Yeah, and if you're like, but in the same token, you're like, I'm just this guy from Bronx as a teacher. Like, I'm not anything, and that's better. It's like, it's so easy to not get caught up in because we're not swimming in those, I mean, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Like upper, pretentious, we're intellectual circles, right? I mean,
which is better. It's one thing that you mentioned Vox Day earlier. It's one thing that he understands really well. And he mentioned it in one of his videos, podcast video things. And he's like, you don't want to be there. Like, you don't want to be up at that super elite, like pretentious up. It's like there's people. The people are jerks. They're midwits. They're half-wits. They're talent-free. They've been chosen by the puppet masters because they'll do as they're told. And they won't rock the boat. It's like, he didn't say be content. I'm not really doing it justice, but it's like those people that you see are some of he called them ticket takers. Like, they've taken the ticket. They've sold their soul to a degree, and it's all in varying degrees. And he's like, so be glad that you're not there, and don't try to strive to be there, and it's, and it made a lot of sense because the trade-offs of the price you'd have to pay for this maniacal desire, not you, but anybody, like a maniacal desire to reach the top. And be at the the pinnacle. I'm not wired that way, for one thing. Like I don't need that. The last thing I want to be is famous. Wealthy. Now I'm 49, so I'm running out of time if I want to be wealthy, right? But I like money. I'll be wealthy, right? Oh, I'm going to be rich. Well, okay, Doug. Well, you're 50 in April, so when does this happen? And clock is ticking. But
well, you got those mining stocks, so it's like conservative.
Dude, you tell me what is going on with the Canadians, the Athabasca Basin, whatever is going up there. You guys are up there printing money, man. I don't know what you guys have your act together, man. I'm late to the party. But and uranium too. It's uranium is big, but it's like I don't have any desire to be famous, and so to be doing this on this level has always been something that I'm very comfortable with. Right? I don't have no desire to like go up against Doubleday Books or Random House or anything like that. Like I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't want to be associated with those people. Again, mainstream media, corporate media, they're so repellent. It's become they're so despicable.
I got an idea.
Yeah.
Let's do this then.
Okay.
We can do the pre-orders, right, for both the books. And then Vox has like this like kick-ass publishing company.
Yeah.
Like we can make it
books.
Yeah, we can make it in like leather bounded something or other.
Oh my God.
How much would that like prestige of a book shape the voice? I think it instantly changes it.
It does. It really does.
Doesn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Like we could have a fun time trying to dramatize it in a ultra elegant, very rare. I mean, like, how would we write in that case, right?
Yeah. The packaging would be off the charts. Yeah, it's really.
And then sell 6 or something like that. I don't know.
200, whatever. I mean, again, I'm the guy with the book on Amazon. He wrote with his 6-year-old daughter. It has sold no copies. So I think it's free if you're I don't even know. Like I did the self-publishing thing on Amazon a long time ago, 7 years ago.
Yeah,
the little family of mice that lives down by the river.
Yeah,
in Riverdale where I live, the Riverdale River Mice, and she and I came up with the story, and 0 copies, right? And a grand total of $0 and 0. And it doesn't bother me at all. Like it wasn't about that. And yeah.
The one point I wanted to say was the catharsis. Okay, so what do you think about this theory of writing? I mean, this is not too hard, but writing kind of helps you think, like sitting down and putting your thoughts on paper and stuff. So there could be this element of catharsis to it, right? Trying to be able to organize your thoughts in this concrete, objective format, right? Saying, and how does this vary from ancient societies? Well, we do have these tools and these mechanisms to be able to do that, whether it's a writing pad or a little MacBook or whatever. It doesn't really, for the purpose of this point, it doesn't really matter. It's just the fact that if more and more people wrote just to try and get their, even journaling, right? I tell a lot of new writers to, journal, just get your thinking down. Are you trying to, like, do you have strong, fluid, consistent, logical thinking? Or if you don't, can you describe the turmoil and the various, emotions that you're trying to wade through? Can you describe those, right? And I think both of those, vectors are both important. And so I'm just wondering, what you think about developing that kind of a writer's voice, I guess I would say, and encouraging people to use the writing practice as something that's just a cathartic extension of themselves.
Yeah, I think it's just yet another good angle, right? That's one of those things where it's one of these elemental practices that people do, right? The cathartic angle, the practice, the everything from, the more you do something, the better you're going to get at it, but also like that emotional angle you're talking about, where that has value unto itself. I think it just adds another layer. I think it just adds another benefit. So
I'm hoping that your role as the tutor in these situations would be that you were somebody that could, simultaneously operate as a teacher and a friend to somebody who's just writing something and just asking, how can I improve that? And I do like the depth of your teaching consciousness or mentality that you can go into some of the, the poetic or, some of the non-traditional, ways of working, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, right. It's going to be, the student that I would relate to is someone gritty who, likes to roll around in the mud, maybe have a slap fight, gouge someone's eyeball out, right? That kind of writing, because, the pretentiousness I don't do well. I'm not at you guys' level when it comes to the hardcore philosophy, but earthy, based. How do people act? What would people really say? Does this have the right tone? That kind of stuff. I'm just because of 25 years of reading my own material, the stuff that I have here behind me that you can't see, and my own work and student work. Like it's that kind of stuff is I'm reasonably good at it. That kind of thing will be right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, I want to give you an example of something that my son submitted to me. Actually, it's on the planksip site. And it was something about I gave him a writing assignment of trying to investigate what the Macedonian star, the 16-pointed sun, was all about, right?
Interesting.
Yeah,
I don't think I know about that.
Oh yeah, that's on either side of the bell curve. That's why 32 is my favorite number.
Wow.
But anyways, that's just a little geeky. But anyway, so
well, I like conspiracies. So you say something like 16-pointed star and the numerology behind it, I'm there. Oh yeah.
Well, those I never was able to get into the spiritual part of the numerology, but from a heuristic standpoint, much like religion, I'd be like, okay, I'm working with this stuff all the time, and then if it does trigger it, I don't make it causal. I just it's an interesting reference point for me to go, oh, that's interesting. And that's it. That's all I I use so much of that kind of logic in how I publish and iteratively publish within our media outlet too. A lot of that type of that type of thinking.
Yeah, yeah, great. All right, are we ready to stick a fork in ourselves? I have to actually finish putting up Christmas lights.
Yeah, and it's 9:30, so I don't.
Yeah, but that's all good. But they're doing their thing. We like having the ambiance of the lights and the stuff for as long as possible. And I finally got a tree that I don't think will be shedding needles like crazy. So I'm pretty proud of myself for doing that. But yeah, thanks.
No, did it? But I did. I wanted that to sound very powerful, like a friend. I mean, good for you, man. That's good. But just the slight variation in sound, it can,
Right. Yeah, no, it's good. But no, great ideas as always, man. It's we chat like this and the hour just vaporizes so fast. It's quite incredible.
Well, that's what'll happen, and then you'll see. We'll go through this through a year, and you'll say, "Holy shit, we've produced 2 books. We've had 50 episodes, and that can get iteratively better and better too." And so we have all these clips of us talking about our books and whatever it is. And I don't have to be an author on it. Actually, I mean, I could even just be somebody in the the footnote.
Either way, we'll play it by ear. That's what I like about it. It doesn't have to be like, okay, here's the plan, here's the sheet, these are your roles. Like, I'm too old for that, right? I'm not down with that, right? That more not totally loose and freewheeling, but Well,
one of the good things about putting these on the Google Books and Apple Books is that we can get them on. And did you know that they are updatable?
No.
So this is something that I want to challenge the status quo of publications with, is that I can publish it, I can come up with the ISBN, I can also update a revision. And so if we have the soft launch, right, we call it the soft launch, while we're selling, pre-order hard copies, right? They could even be pre-order hard copy with signature and like leather skin, whatever. It doesn't matter, right? But you can have that. And then when you're ready to publish it, then you can say, all right, well, we've got a couple hundred. And, it's just something to put at the end of the show. It's something to
Right.
And then once we've done the artwork for that, and once we've kind of put it to the end of the show, then it behooves us not to just try and, get people in eyeballs to look at the show. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that is what we are. We can't be more than that. I can't be more than a philosopher that owns a media outlet. And you can't be more than a teacher that has, a lot of history with, the kind of students that you've had.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we have our insights, and that's it. And if we can, I think it packages nicely, a nice little series, especially along with the book. I think you may have to get to a point where you have to go on a few other, like outwardly try and talk with other podcasts,
Right.
Because as soon as they Google you, they'll find out you got these, these books, or they'll pay more attention to the show or whatever.
Good point.
Right?
Yeah. I didn't think of that.
So the ideas that we're talking about can still replicate whether or not, if they buy the book or not, right?
True. Yes.
Are more people watching, Gatto than they were before,
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
And I'm not going to get into it today, but I will tell you that I have a tool that I developed. I had to get special approval from Google on that can monitor that.
Oh,
wouldn't it be interesting for you to say that you could actually monitor, roughly speaking, your contributions over a period of time to this? Like if it took off and you could see a measurable blip.
Right.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
That would be pretty cool. Yeah.
To really see like that analytic of being able to get our dominant culture to look at this.
Yeah.
More seriously. Yeah, I have the tool. I have a tool for that.
That's pretty neat.
It's not an app, but it's a tool.
Right. Yeah, but to measure that is pretty neat.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Being able to measure that and codify that is cool.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, we'll have to continue. We'll have to continue this again. I'll send more topics or some of the same ones, and you'll see when you start looking. If you have time, I mean, our weeks are busy as they are, but if you ever do get into or look at some of the John Taylor Gatto stuff, I think you'll be intrigued. I think so too. Interested by it, no doubt.
On so many levels, I think I can look at this from a libertarian standpoint and from enforcement and, fundamental fundamental, like you had mentioned, de Tocqueville analysis or libertarian position. Like, I mean, this is really fascinating to see it actually in our educational systems.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think it's really interesting. One last thing. Did I tell you about the School of Austin yet?
You mentioned it last time. I don't remember the dirty details.
Yeah, have a look at there's a Lex Friedman episode.
Yes. Okay.
That you should check out and listen to at least on the first half of it. The other guy was a historian. You knew his books. Yeah, have a listen to it because especially I didn't know that you did some. You sit on like a university board too. So
no. I'm an adjunct professor. I'm the lowest of the low. I'm the bottom feeder. I'm an instructional cockroach. I'm nothing. But
you get to go in. You can go into that school if you
with an ID. I have a Syracuse ID.
Right.
For real, I have a Syracuse ID.
But you could talk to the student union, though, right? You could say, "Hey, blah blah blah. Are you guys interested in this kind of a presentation?"
I probably could. Physically, Syracuse is a 4-hour drive away, but after having run the program at Syracuse University Project Advance at my school for the last 5 years or so, and my direct supervisor is connected there as well. It's a connection. There's a legit connection. It wouldn't be a shot in the dark.
Because what I was thinking is that, I did want to launch this thing with the students in January. And it is a presentation. I can give you the presentation, but I think where it's lacks, I've given like 1,000 presentation to architects and stuff and engineers, but it lacks a couple things because I don't know if it's speaking to the students properly. Right. Like you get like business advice is to define what your company is and what it, what its mission is and its core values. And because internally we always look to these types of things when, management teams kind of come under like, what should we do here? Well, always default to the educational approach. Are you doing it is somebody have a potential to learn something? Right. Default in that direction, right? That's things like this, right? Okay. And the presentation unfolds and it starts to explain all of these types of things, but I just don't know if it's too much, how much will actually be, it's whether it should be greatly pared down or, so I'd love for you to have a look at it. And then, because the ultimate thing would be, I know from my standpoint, if I'm thinking of introducing somebody to something about something, then I want to know about it, and then we have a chance to make it better, because if you do introduce it, you're like, yeah, it's a good thing, or it's not. If it's not, then but we should spend some time trying to figure out if this does have some potential value for the students. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we'll have to check it out for sure. I'll take a look and see, see, let it go through my filter. Yeah. And see what comes up. Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. On that note, so let's boogie, and until next week, and start thinking about those books. Yeah. And I'll do some artwork and get that going and put that on the, I think it'll look really good rotating, between the two. Yeah. Rather than just black and white, right? And we'll both pick up our respective guitars and kind of get back into that. I got to do that too. Oh, are you going to challenge me on that too? Oh my. No challenge, no, but plant the seed. Yeah. What do you like? Do you like Dave Matthews? Or I do. You do, eh? Yeah. I like for a couple years there, I was really into the pre-famous Dave Matthews, like 1993, 1992, those old recordings that were on tape. I have some of those with the original keyboard player, the original 6 guys. Like for a while there, I was really into that because it's the genesis of all the stuff that put them on the map originally. Yeah, really good stuff. Yeah. So I'm cool with that. The band is all newer guys now. I think there's only 2 or 3 guys left from the original group, but I was a big fan of them, huge, from 1994-5 to about 2001, 2002. Then I kind of, went other ways, and I go back and listen periodically for sure. Yeah. I think he's just slowly grown, and he's now, I think, probably one of the biggest franchises just because of he's kind of like, the emergent new Grateful Dead kind of movies, kind of go. I haven't stayed up to date, but I'll have to check it out, because I know they're they're out there trucking, they're doing their thing. Yeah, and I like it. They just keep going, and they're just some band members change. They write their own stuff. It's good. Jesse Cook's another one I really like. I don't know Jesse Cook. That's not a name I know. More of a Spanish kind of guitar sort of thing, but it's really good. It's worth checking out. Yeah. Send me some links. Yeah, I'll check it out. All right, man. All right. Dude, as always, I look forward to next week. Okay, bye now. You got it, man. I like most of my